Welcome to Against the Tide, the podcast where extraordinary change makers share their stories and their wisdom. Against the Tide is a celebration of courageous women who defy expectation to create lasting impact by daring to forge their own paths. We'll dive deep into powerful themes such as the complexity of identity and how it influences the choices we make, embracing change even when it feels uncomfortable, and how breaking free from labels can unlock your true potential. Join me, Jo Metcalf, to hear stories of incredible women who, by swimming against the tide, prove that extraordinary things can happen. I'm delighted to welcome Beth Goddard to the podcast. Beth is a facilitator, coach and learning program developer with over 20 years of experience. Beth is known for her creative and playful approach, working in partnership with others to create impactful learning experiences. Throughout her career, Beth has focused on developing people in leadership and transition points, helping them navigate their journey with confidence and clarity. Her work is characterised by a deep commitment to personal growth. In this conversation, Beth opens up about challenges of consistently swimming against the tide and the transformative power of leaning into the uncomfortable. If you're looking to enhance your leadership skills or explore new avenues, Beth's path to understanding herself will inspire you to bravely swim against the tide. This conversation will leave you ready to face the things that you've been avoiding and determined to swim against the tide. Welcome, Beth. Really excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us. And I can't wait to see where this conversation goes. So thank you. We'll get straight in if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me a bit about your early years and how they shaped the person you are today?
I can. So I was not born in the UK. I was born in Papua New Guinea. My parents were out in New Guinea doing a voluntary service overseas contract, a VSO contract. So for the first 5 years of my life, I was running around naked in the garden, in the tropics, being exposed to all sorts of sights, sounds, colours, smells, people. And whilst I only have vague memories of that time, I really think that that experience has influenced a lot of my development, a lot of my attitudes, a lot of my values, not only the environment that I was exposed to, but also seeing my mum and dad be trailblazers of their time, really. You know, they went to the other side of the planet with no internet, with only snail mail, without the ability to get home really quickly, to go and do something different and explore and be in that place of servant leadership. So, yeah, it was... It's such a big part of my story, and I turned 45 this year, and there's something beginning to kind of really speak to me in terms of I'd really like to go and see where I was born, to see where I lived, because there's a part of my narrative that I don't have any adult context for, but I know that it's fundamentally shaped who I am.
Wow, that must have been incredible. I didn't know that when we've chatted
did you
before.
not?
No,
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing
You're
all
welcome.
of that. Why does this theme, swimming against the tide, resonate with you so strongly?
It really does resonate with me strongly, and I was so humbled, actually, to be invited to come and speak. And it resonates because I feel like the majority of my life I have been swimming against the tide. My experiences have meant that quite often I've been out of sync with my peers and not in the norm, or not in, like, not that there is a natural kind of chronology of life, but just against the flow of what other people were doing. And so, yeah, to have the opportunity to just come and explore that with you, actually, it was like, yeah, I'm intrigued to, share a little bit about my own story, but also I know that I will take something away from this conversation that's going to maybe make me think in a slightly different way, or contextualise some of the things that I have experienced in a new way, and hopefully give your listeners something to think about in terms of where they might be in their life. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are you happy to share anything?
Yeah, of course.
Please
So,
do.
as I say, the majority of my life I've been swimming against the tide. Let's go back to, I was born out of the country in a place that most people haven't heard of. Where's that? Oh, it's the dinosaur-shaped island down by Australia. You know, it was literally the tropics. And my dad was out there doing engineering, so he was building hospitals for local people. And my mum was teaching English. She was teaching the Burundi boys English within that context. So again, you know, coming back into the UK, I was different because I had these other experiences that nobody else had any reference for. Childhood was normal, whatever normal means, but I, you know, came from a beautiful family. My parents were super supportive. My little sister came along when I was 5. You know, we had not a privileged background. I come from really strong working class roots, but my dad changed our stars. So my upbringing was comfortable. I was, I suppose, a bit of a goody two-shoes in school in the respect that I loved learning. I loved, you know, being explorative and curious about the world. I was definitely not one of the popular kids. And so to then fall pregnant at the age of 18 was a big shock to many, many, many people, including myself. And without being, you know, taking this into a really vulnerable space 10 minutes in, but it was only the first person I'd ever slept with. I was, you know, we were using contraception. I should not have fallen pregnant when I did. And I did. And seeing those 2 blue lines on a pregnancy test at 18 was, I've just done it. It was a intake of breath. Oh my goodness, this now changes the path of my life forward, because at that particular moment in time, I had very, very strong opinions about abortion. I was very, I suppose, quite black and white in my thinking in terms of morality and values. And abortion it wasn't an option for me. And so very quickly it moved from this is a big shock to the system, excuse me. How now do we navigate this in a way that, you know, means that we can bring this little person into the world with love and support? And I was all in. I was all into the experience, and I was really fortunate that, you know, I'll share a little bit more in this second, but my now ex-husband was also all in terms of creating this little family. My parents were super supportive. They were shocked. There was a lot of tears. God bless. But they were just extraordinary. They really were super supportive, gave both myself and my ex-husband what we needed at that moment in time. And I was very, very emphatic. We will do this. We're not going to ask you for anything other than what you would do if I wasn't pregnant. And so our daughter came along. In fact, I'll step back, because when I was pregnant, that was also the time that I was applying to university. And I had this desire to work in the arts. I loved creativity. I loved everything about creativity. I'd chosen particular organisations. I went and had an interview at Bretton Hall, so down in the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Got an unconditional offer, and then called up the course tutor, Peter Collis, his name was, and said, this is the situation. I'm pregnant. Does that alter anything? And he called me up at home when I was about 7 months pregnant and said, the place is unconditional. We will accept you when you're ready to come. And I was like, oh my goodness. He changed my life, actually, that man. And so for the first year of Leia's life, we stayed at my mum and dad's. And then my dad got a job in Kuala Lumpur. He and my mum and my sister were all moving out. My sister's 5 years younger. And Dad said to me, you can come, or you can stay here. And Rich and I really, really thought hard and went, do you know what? Our life is not in Kuala Lumpur. You know, we'd be expats. We'd be living off my dad. It would be the wrong step forward in terms of us moving forward as a family. And I want to go to university. I want to go and do, I studied arts management. And so when Leia was about, 15 months old, we moved up to Yorkshire. Mum and Dad moved to the other side of the planet.
Wow.
And we were literally in the middle of nowhere, knowing no one, me just about to start university with this little toddler in tow, or this little baby in tow. Was like, okay, right, roll sleeves up and let's just crack on with where we are now and, experience what we're experiencing now, knowing that our support system had gone. So we became a really strong little unit, did go to uni. I got my first class degree.
Amazing.
It was very interesting to be in my peer group because I was the only one with a child. It was interesting when, in swimming against the tide context, they were all off out, living their best life, going to clubs, doing this, that and the other. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm going home. I've got work to do. I've got my degree to get. I've got money to earn. I've got a household to keep. And so again, there was just this slight, I'm out of sync with other people, but I'm going to still keep going because this is the pathway that I'm on. Got my first class degree. So that was all great. And after uni, Rich and I got married. We had decided we weren't going to get married and just because we had a baby. It was more a case of letting our relationship form and recognising that we'd created this family unit. We got married, had the best double day celebration. It was absolutely awesome. Flipping loved it. Loved it. Then our son came along. And for the first sort of 3-4 years of married life, I was living the dream. Absolutely living the dream. I had a job that I wanted. I had the family that I wanted. I was, feeling really comfortable in my own skin. I understood the dynamics that I was operating in. Loved it. It was just, it's like, oh my God, I've got all of this at the age of 25. This is just, yes, please, life. Continue like that, please. And life had other plans. It was probably when our son was about 3 or 4 years old that I began to feel a bit of a disconnect in my marriage. It wasn't even a bit of a disconnect. It was a really significant disconnect. It was like my husband had gone. And I remember so distinctly standing on a step. My ex-husband is 6'4". As you can see, I'm not. I'm 5'3". I'm very short. And he was hugging me, but it was like, you're not here in this hug. I can't feel you. And because of who I am, and I'm a problem solver and I like to fix things, and it became really clear over the course of about 6 months that to stay married was not going to be tenable, that it would put my ex-husband in a place of really significant discomfort and pain, and that actually it would put me in a place where it was inauthentic and not honest. And without, as I say, going into the deeps and the darks, in a very, very short space of time, I went from being in a 2.4 family unit married context of home to single mum. My husband moved out. I had no job at the time because I was in a bit of a break, and I had 2 small children going, oh, okay, so the rug's been pulled from underneath me and now I have no idea what I am supposed to do because there's a mental health breakdown happening over there. There's some practical requirements in terms of making life work. I have no job and I've got 2 small children. And so, again, swimming against the tide, it was a case of, right, roll my sleeves up, let's go and find a job. And I'll take any job that comes. The first one that I'm offered, I will take it because there's a necessity, there's a survival. And I found myself working, coming from the arts world into sport, into the Football League or the EFL Trust, so the charitable arm of the Football League. And my goodness, what a culture shock that was, to go from collaboration and communication and, everybody in it together to competition and let's smash those targets and make sure everybody else knows that we're the best. And again, swimming against the tide, it was like, oh, okay. So everything that I knew doesn't work in this context. I'm going to have to find really quickly the way to almost chameleon-like into this setting, into this context, to be able to do my job and make it work and create the connections that are going to be able to support me to do the thing. And it was a really interesting time, actually. I learnt a lot from the EFL Trust and being in that world. And so at that time, there were two narratives going on. There was all this personal narrative of the separation and then divorce and the changing of relationship, alongside this brand new world of professional practice and going from, as I say, creativity into competitive spaces and, a lot of, what's the word, discombobulation, I suppose, in that particular period of time. And then things didn't settle, but they settled in the sense that I began to get a lot more comfortable with the discomforts of all of my life, or at that particular moment in time. And whilst they didn't settle per se, they were manageable. Things kind of felt like they were beginning to move in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Great. I'm in flow. Maybe I'm with the tide rather than against it. Great. And then again, life had another plan. Mm-hmm. So all of the compassion fatigue of what was going on in my personal life caught up with me. Mm-hmm. I couldn't get out of bed. It was one of the most, what's the right word? I don't know what the right word is. I felt really disconnected from my body, because my body, it just wasn't doing anything. And
surreal.
Yeah, that's probably the word. It was because it wasn't depression. It wasn't depression. It was just I've got nothing in the tank. Just nothing. I'm trying to balance all of these different things and there's nothing left. And I remember, I went back to work a little bit too soon actually, but I remember during that period of time, I said, I am never, ever, ever letting myself get to this place again. Ever. This was on me. I wasn't asking for the right support. At the time, I wasn't, I was trying to do everything on my own because, roll sleeves up. I've experienced other things. I can get on with it. I can do it. Went back to work. Then found myself on the Claw Social Leadership Programme, and that was the next curveball, because I got halfway through the programme and went, I'm in the wrong job, doing the wrong thing, and I absolutely need to get back to what I know lights me up, brings massive impact and value to other people, in a way that I'm going to have greater impact and service to the world. And so I left my job halfway through my Claw programme, which upon reflection was maybe a little bit stupid, or as other people have said, brave, but it was so visceral in my body. It's like, I can't stay here. I need to go and do something different. So I jacked it all in. I left a full-time job with a full-time salary, and I made the decision to go freelance and walk away from a salaried regular income to go and do it on my own. Yeah, I'm watching.
And how did that feel? How did it feel?
Well, at the time, it was I can't do anything else. And because I've got no plan B, I will just make this work. I will just make it work, because there is no plan B, because I can't stay where I am. I know that now. And ultimately, I've got to pay the mortgage and the rent and make sure all of the different complex parts of my life are still manageable and tenable. And so I just stepped onto the new path and went, I'll just find a way to make it work. And for the first 18 months, crafted hard. Like, I have never worked so hard in my life, genuinely. And started freelancing as a coach, as a facilitator, doing a lot of work in leadership development. I was really fortunate. Claw took me on as one of their facilitators in Hull, which is where I did my programme. Then recognised that I was pretty good at this facilitation thing, took me on as one of their programme directors for their national programmes. That exposed me to lots of different people. I trained in Luminous Spark, which is a psychometric tool, which again opened up massive doors. And all of a sudden I found myself in this most extraordinary place, sort of 2.5 years on, going, ooh, I'm now doing work for the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. I mean, anyway, that's another story for another time. And all of these kinds of really magical opportunities had just opened themselves up because I'd had the courage, stupidity to step onto a new path and swim against the tide and do things my way rather than the way that was kind of expected.
So how have you learned to embrace discomfort and work through challenges for personal growth?
I would say discomfort. Again, that swimming against the tide piece has just been there my entire life narrative. And so therefore it's my normal. Okay, there've been some things that have been more uncomfortable than others, and some things that I absolutely wish hadn't been my experiences. But like strengthening a muscle in the gym, the more you experience something, the stronger you can become in that space. And so I just think embracing the discomfort, it's just kind of been my normal, and therefore it's normal, if that makes sense. I do sometimes wish it wasn't, but that's kind of the thing. And moving into that kind of place of challenge, I now recognise that some of the experiences I've had have directly impacted on the way that I am able to be in the world, especially professionally. So as way of example, you know, some of the things that I've learnt over the course of my marriage changing and how to be alongside someone with significant difficulties is I've learnt how to ask really good questions very sensitively, to trust my intuition, to trust my gut, to be able to be fully present with somebody in a way that enables, you know, growth and development. And so I know that actively embracing the challenge has enabled me to sharpen my skills professionally as a coach, as a facilitator, as somebody who just loves being with people and enabling them to grow. And that, again, is absolutely from being mum. You know, all of a sudden I was responsible for this little person at the age of 18 going, I want to get this little person to the place where both of them are just able to own who they are and fly off out into the world. Well, that means I've got to mentor, I've got to coach, I've got to guide, I've got to be really tough with some of the boundaries. So all of those parenting skills actually have transferred into a lot of my professional practice. Not that I'm wanting to parent, you know, people who I work with, but there's something around the ability to listen well, to see what might be happening in that individual, to then be able to guide and support and challenge and enable them to move forward consciously for themselves is quite significant. And then, as you know, we created a Firefly Adventure program, which kind of encapsulates everything that we've talked about so far, which is absolutely about supporting people in a really intentionally created container to have high support and high challenge, to be able to embrace discomfort, to ultimately be in a position to embrace, acknowledge, celebrate, lean into challenge in a way to activate growth. So,
and it leads nicely into the next one, because you're talking there about supporting others. Why have you chosen to use your experience to support others in their journeys?
Because as far as we know, we're only in life once. And I want people, all people, to experience as much of life as possible and to be able to find those places of joy, of fun, of love, of compassion, of hope, of adventure, of possibility. And I really do fundamentally believe you only get that when you can also embrace the dark and the discomforts and the challenges, because one can't exist without the other. The moon doesn't exist without the sun and vice versa. Light doesn't exist without dark. But I'm just so driven by helping people flourish and have the best possible experience of life and work as I possibly can. Because ultimately, and this is first person, I want to get to the end of my life going, bloody hell, that was freaking awesome. Let's go again. What a ride.
I can feel that.
It's so strong.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. You often speak, and we've chatted about grappling with understanding of authentic self and the struggle to show up as your true self. Yeah. How are these aspects sometimes conflicting?
I think that's an interesting question for me right now, because I think for me, is I don't think I'm feeling that conflict anymore. I've definitely been on a journey this last sort of 12 months or so of really stepping into my authentic self, no longer no longer hiding who I am, owning what I bring to the world rather than going, from a very modest and humble. It's like, yes, I can be that, but also I make a difference. And I've shied away and almost deflected some of that at times because it's like very British, isn't it? Let's just be humble. But no, do you know what? I'm really good at what I do, and I have got a lot of love to share with the world. So actually, let's share it. So I don't necessarily feel a conflict with being my authentic self anymore. I absolutely have done in the past. In fact, I have had. There's still a few little roots of it, I think, a limiting belief that I'm too much. Now, I've got big energy. I know I've got big energy. I know that I live and love large. I've got a lot of love. Some people have called me intense in the past because I just want you to be the best. I just want you to have the best possible experience of life. And there was I'll share where this limiting belief came from. My first job was in a theatre, and I had a piece of feedback from a colleague. It was meant as a compliment, but I've reflected on it a lot since, because it actually started a bit of a negative perspective on myself, because this colleague said, "You shine so brightly that you blind other people." I was like, I don't want to blind other people, but that's not comfortable. No, and began to just kind of play a little bit smaller. And that continued, this kind of, I've got to contain myself and hold myself small to not blind other people. And that kind of, it became a bit insidious actually, and I didn't realise that limiting belief was there until about 3 years ago. I did a really interesting professional development programme just for women. It was the first time I'd ever been in a women's only space, and that was interesting in itself. And I do a lot of facilitation. This was a place where I was just coming in as Beth, and I agreed with the facilitator. I can come in as Beth, and this particular facilitator said, "I want all of you." I was like, "Right, I've got the permission. You're going to have all of me." And it was a 12-week programme, and we must have got to about week 8. And I was responding to all of the things in terms of the content each week. And we had weekly online calls, and we were invited to share. And so I shared. And then on this live call with 15 other women on it, 15, maybe there were 15 in total, one of the women said, "You are too much." Wow. And it was like a dagger into my heart and stomach. I can feel it right now. It was like, ugh. There it is again, this message that I am too much. And I literally crumbled on this call, sobbed. But it was like, here it is again. I am too much. Not that my behaviour is too much. I am too much. So therefore, I've got to shrink. I've got to hide myself. And I was very aware that there were other people in that dynamic. There's the facilitator in me. It's like, I know that there are other people who are far more introverted, who are deeply reflective. Let me just go and check in that they're okay. And I remember this one woman, and she'd shared in the programme that she was a highly sensitive person. I was like, "I am so sorry if I am too much for you." And it was such a profound response. She said, "You aren't too much for me. You are you. And how I manage my response to you is my responsibility. Yeah. It's not for you to dim your light." And I was like, huh. And then another woman said, "A supernova can only be a supernova."
Brilliant.
It's like, oh. And she said, "Other people can put sunglasses on." And I'm like, oh, okay. It was such a shift in terms of, I'm not too much, and I might be too much for other people, but that's their responsibility to either communicate with me and let me know so that I can make a choice of how I then engage with that individual, or put sunglasses on, metaphorically. And it was such a shift. And then I started kind of untangling from that belief and stepping more into my authentic self. Right, you can have all of me, and I might just hold back on this one because the connection doesn't quite feel right, or I can see from facilitator coach perspective that you might have more of those kind of more measured and reserved energy, and so let me just figure out and play with the dynamics a little bit. But that's not about me tuning myself down. It's about me going, I'm here and I'm consciously choosing how I am behaving with you in this dynamic, so as to just kind of test things out.
Yeah, you can see those tipping points, and it's amazing when someone says something to you and how the impact that
Oh,
can
it was
have.
like a dagger.
So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Have there been any surprise or interesting insights regarding your identity that you'd like to share? And I talk about that in the context of Luminous Sparks, because I know when you did mine, there were some interesting things came out around me, and I found that whole experience really insightful. So is there anything around your identity?
Yes. So given that you've referenced Lumina, I will also reference Lumina. So for those listening, Lumina Spark, it's a psychometric, it's a personality profiling system. It's fairly new in the marketplace. It's only about 13 years old. But it's a traits-based model as opposed to a types-based model. So rather than putting somebody in a box, it actually looks at where we might have what we term personality paradoxes. This is who I am. This is how I like to show up. This is where I can do things a little bit too much and it not necessarily be very helpful. Great. Now I've got a choice of how I'm responding to certain situations and certain people. That's one answer to your question. I think the other answer to your question around identity is more complex, because I think identity is very much the labels everybody else gives us, actually. You know, I could give myself the label of being a teen mum. I could give myself the label of being an artist. I could give myself the label of being an entrepreneur. I could give myself the label of, you know, a contract manager within the sporting world. I could give myself the label of a life explorer entrepreneur. I could give myself the label of a coach or a facilitator or a psychometric practitioner, which is so far and wide that how then does that become one identity? Because it will depend on who I'm talking to as to how they see me. And so I've rejected labels a little bit and gone for, I don't know whether you've ever come across the term multi-potentialite.
I have not.
Oh,
no.
okay.
Explain.
So that's the one label that I'm kind of going, yeah, I like that. So somebody introduced me to a TED Talk, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, by a lady called Emily Wapnick. And the TED Talk is entitled Why Some People Don't Have One True Calling. Okay, and the term that she's coined is multi-potentialite. So people who are multi-passionate, multiple, they've got multiple identities because actually they're interested in lots of different things. And I'm like, that's a box that's not a box. I like that. I'll claim that one, being a multi-potentialite, which is don't have one true calling. It depends on the day and who I'm with and what I'm doing as to which version of me you get, I suppose.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. So much in there. I think we could talk all day. But what are your hopes for the future, both personally and professionally?
That's such a big question, isn't it? Because the world is a very strange place at the moment. And it's a question that I think is difficult to separate out from world and global context currently. But if I make it very sort of micro, personal to me at this moment in time, my hopes for the future would be that my kids continue to thrive, that they continue to carve their own pathways in the world that make them feel happy and connected and joyful, even amongst all of the challenges that might come their way. My hope for my own future is to be in a place where I'm still continually being satisfied by my work. I love my work. I'm really fortunate I don't actually work a day in my life anymore. I love what I do. And I want to continue that and create spaces and places for people to come and experience joy and fun and possibility. My hope professionally is to continue to build Firefly, which obviously we've talked about. I know I've not spoken about it on the podcast, but to build what is a different way of doing business, of a different offering to the world in a way that builds both a sustainable future for the business, but also a sustainable future for me and my two business partners in a way that is going to create a legacy that exists well beyond us. You know, we're a social enterprise. We're not for profit. We're trying to create this kind of circular experience, both from a financial perspective, but also in terms of where people are connected with the things that we're offering to the world. We know we're doing it differently. We're absolutely making it up as we go along, which is probably not a good thing to admit out loud, but we are. And swimming against the tide. Do I have any other hopes for the future? Right now, no, I don't.
And if anyone's interested in Fireflies, how do they find out more?
Find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to come and have a conversation.
Excellent. So finally, we've got one last question. Finally, have you got any words of wisdom for other women who are grappling with change?
Take it one step at a time. Be present to what's currently your reality, because you can only work with the reality that you've got. You know, and this is something, again, that I've really lent into in terms of my coaching practice. It's about presence and just being present to what is, you know, not the things that we think are there or the things that we hope to be there, but what's real right now, and how do you take the step forward that is positive and progress and, you know, manageable. Because change is hard. Change is hard. And actually, if we can be really aware of the present moment that we're in, we can find the ways to step forward in a way that is forward progress.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining today. Love that conversation.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to Against the Tide, brought to you by Think for Wellbeing, the social change-making organisation. With thanks to Louise Kavanagh at Purposeful Marketing and the team at Sticks and Glass. Subscribe to Against the Tide wherever you get your podcasts so you will never miss an inspiring episode.